All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming today. I want to thank you for attending this panel discussion on community consulting and expertise in tech research. I would like to also thank the including Disability Global Summit for selecting and hosting us today. My name is Lyndon Firmer. I am a PhD student in Virginia Tech at Virginia Tech, and I am a former research assistant for Discotech Consulting. It is a pleasure to moderate this discussion with you all today and the Discotech Consulting group. As a group, they have been working on centering disabled people's voices in research, and especially research and development of technology around and for disability bodies. Ooh, excuse me. I just got out of a conversation about just presenting on trans bodies. So I might be a little tongue-tied. But anyways, before we start getting into the conversation, I would love our panelists to introduce themselves. I would like if I could have the co-principal investigators introduce themselves and then to research assistants.
Yeah, I'll go and then pass it to Karish. I'm Ashley Shew. I'm an associate professor at Virginia Tech in the Department of Science, Technology, and Society, working on this project, which you're going to hear a lot more about in a minute. And I'll pass the mic.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karish, and I'm an assistant professor in the construction engineering department at Virginia Tech. I work with Ashley in this project.
Great.
I'll pass it to Annabelle.
Hi, my name is Annabelle Fiesler. I'm staff at Virginia Tech. I work in the Office of Analytics and Institutional Effectiveness, and I've served as a consultant with the Discotech Group. And I'll pass it to Connie.
Hi, everyone. I didn't test my mic earlier, so I hope it works. I am a graduate student in, thanks, London. I'm a graduate student in the Science and Technology Studies Department, and I am a consultant participant with Discotech, and I have neurodivergent disabilities. It is a joy to participate.
Thanks, Connie. Oliver, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hi, my name is Oliver. I'm a third year PhD student in the Department of Science and Technology Studies in Virginia Tech as well. I'm Ashley's graduate assistant this year, and I'm super excited to talk to you guys about what we've been doing.
I guess I'm the last person. I'm Venus Azamia. I am a second year PhD student in Virginia Tech Science Technology Society Department. And I'm also a graduate research assistant in this project.
Fantastic. Thank you all for the introductions. And thank you for this discussion today. I'm really looking forward to what we're going to be talking about today. To begin, I would just like to ask a general question. It's open to everybody, but it's kind of more geared towards Ashley at least. But could you talk about, please describe what Discotech Consulting is and what y'all have been working.
Yeah, and I'm happy if people want to interrupt and correct me. I can tell you what it's supposed to be and what we want it to be. Whether we're living up to the ideals we have is another question. So when we submitted this grant, part of it has to do with the arts and gaming, and that's not the part we're talking about today. We're talking about the tech research end, where so many times the experts about disability are non-disabled people. And this shows up all the time in technological research, not just research about disability, but like all sorts of research that don't appreciate that disabled people like exist. And we all know retrofit kind of sucks, right? So in thinking about tech projects specifically, although this might apply to other projects more broadly, we often see disabled participants brought in as participants. as human subjects, sort of long after the goals and orientation of a project have been established, right? You think you know what this, what you want to do, and then you bring in disabled people perhaps to try an object or go through a series of steps or something like that. We also see disabled people as sort of test pilots. We see this rhetoric all the time in sort of transhumanist rhetoric about how first we're going to build these technologies on disabled people, things like Neuralink, and then everyone's going to want it. I don't know when that's ever been true once you market it towards disabled people. No one else wants it. That's a whole other thing we could talk about. But I'm thinking about disability tech that we would actually like to see, some of which, is just regular tech too. And so we're trying to center disabled people's experiences in research, and we have this wonderful grant through the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, hat tip to them, that lets us just try out what different disabled consulting groups and advisory boards like might look like in practice. So we're not doing focus groups, which still you're already aimed at like a technology or a process there, but to actually get disabled people like available as consultants through lots of stages of a project, perhaps, but actually incorporated earlier, talking about like what things could do with each other. We're also really committed to cross disability groups, which is to say, I'm a hard of hearing, chemo-brained amputee with Crohn's disease. No one's going to want me for their testing. I have too many other disabilities. So often things are tested where they want one disability. I see calls for participants and test subjects where it's like, we want only people with autism level 1 and no other diagnoses. And those people don't exist. If you have one, you've got to collect them all, right? So, disabled people acquire more disabilities earlier in their lives. And a lot of disabled people who have a lot of expertise to share and expertise that would help make better products and situations in the world are often discounted from research altogether. I mean, I see calls for amputees with at least 1 inch of tibia with below the knee amputations. It's so specific sometimes in ways that if you want to build things in a world that's better for everybody, you can't look so narrowly. So there's a couple of ways that we're trying to recruit um, consultants, and Annabelle was part of one of our first runs, which I did with people I know in the community, where I'm like, please come, can we like test out how this would work, and what these consulting sessions would do, and we've done a good number. That was in 2023. So we're a few years into this project now. One of the wonderful things about having funding is we also believe that disabled people should be paid for their work and labor. And we are able to pay people $100 an hour to come in and have conversations about these technologies in ways that researchers rarely get to see. Sometimes we talk amongst ourselves, and the conversations we have are often really wonderful. We'll let other people dispute that. But so far it's been a lot of fun to do. And since we are consulting, and disabled people who come to our consulting sessions like can choose how much they participate, can report back to us later. We were thinking about like sort of asynchronous communications. If people like don't want to talk in a group, they can shoot Oliver an email after, or fill out a Google form, or call someone on the phone and give them the feedback. We're trying to take things in as flexible a way as possible for maximal disability inclusion. All right, I'm gonna stop talking because I've spent too much time already. Thanks, guys.
Ashley, does anybody else want to add anything to this first question? Kind of broad overviews of what y'all have been working on. Anything else you want to add to? Okay. Well, okay, great. I'll go ahead and move on to the next question that I have lined up for you all. So I want to kind of go into some of the ways that we how I guess like how we talk about trans and disabled people, and this particular symposium is focused on crypt narratives and controlling our stories, and I'm just curious how you all kind of see that and in what ways this research speaks to centering disabled people and their narratives.
I can give it a stab. I think the thing that really centers disabled people is placing them as the experts in our consulting sessions. And we're very explicit with the labs and projects that we consult with about that we're not a focus group, like Ashley said, but that these people are coming in to consult, to provide their honest feedback, to test your device, your process, we've had applications, and they're going to give their honest feedback and they're going to draw from their expertise, from just lived experience trying to navigate the world as disabled people. Um, and so that is how we center their stories, is that they're the experts. They drive every one of our sessions. We are really just in the background taking notes and making sure everyone's comfortable and has the access that they need to participate. But they drive the conversation really, and that's how we center them.
And I'm curious about expertise. Could you all talk a little bit more about disabled expertise and what that kind of looks like in your research?
I mean, so when I think about honoring disabled people as experts, I know that often disabled people have fewer degrees than they deserve because of academic ableism. So many of our folks are highly qualified in a myriad of ways, right? So just in terms of like expertise that doesn't show up on paper in the way people would expect, but also like the lived experience of disability is really valuable as a window into our built spaces and our applications and our gameplay and seeing things from different positions really matters. I'm surprised at every session that we run. Like I'm multiply disabled. Maybe I would be able to figure out some of the feedback that would come. And sometimes I have some expectations, but I try not to let my opinion like occlude anything. I think there's a way in which some of our emergent conversations produce new things. I often think about like sometimes people will bring in a disabled consultant or there will be one disabled person in the room. We make sure that we outnumber the non-disabled people in the room at every moment. And that means that disabled people could actually like have conversations about like where they disagree about things. That you're not just seeing, oh, here's the disability opinion like you might if you were hiring a consultant in for something, but to have this more comprehensive feedback that isn't along, one person's embodiment or one person's idea of like expertise with an object.
Hmm. Uh, and so I guess this is kind of leads to another question that I had for you all. And you touched on this a little bit, Ashley, but I was hoping maybe we could elaborate on this. But how has disabled knowledge been absent from research, and what is some of the impacts that that has?
I couldn't make out the whole question. Can
Oh,
you repeat
sorry.
it? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, definitely. That's okay. Happy to do it. How has disabled knowledge been absent from research, and what is the impact? I know you touched on this a little bit in your kind of intro, but I was hoping maybe you could elaborate a little bit more.
I mean, so there's a larger historical world in where disabled people are disenfranchised along a number of lines, especially multiply marginalized and multiply disabled people who often aren't consultant. Even when groups are trying to do things like co-design and participatory research now, it's often like at the end of the day, you are publishing something with your name at the top. And with the people you consulted, your co-designers, your co-producers, never named. And I find that offensive. I mean, I'm sitting here, my limb amputation is called a Borgreave Van Ness rotation plasty, and neither Doctors Borgreave or Van Ness had rotation plasties. And it's not that I hate those guys because I do like my leg, but I also think about the way in which, like, even our names have been taken off of things that are significant to us. I find the picture of the woman with my procedure in the literature from 1929 She's standing there in her underpants and a really cool prosthesis that looks a lot like mine, and I can't find her name. Like, and there she is. So I think about the way in which like every level of research about disability, like erases disabled people as it happens, even when our pictures are right there. And I find that really like offensive at some point. And I think anonymity is really important in scientific research. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's nearly as important in technological research. Like if someone makes something cool and wants to share it or has like feedback into making things and the world better for other people, I think most people want some sort of not recognition, but at least acknowledgement. And one thing that we do is everyone uses their real name, or they can choose a pseudonym. It's not like I want them to find themselves in the literature later, or be seen in acknowledgments in ways that that our current research structure doesn't allow to happen. And someone else, please speak.
I'd also like to add something. Thank you, Ashley. I work in construction engineering, so our board goal is to create the built environment, anything from hospitals to schools to residential buildings. But one thing that exists is that all of these things in the built environment are designed by people who are not disabled. And engineers, designers, construction managers, there's no disability expertise that they can basically use it in the creation of the built environment. And we have some like guidelines, but those guidelines are also not developed by disabled people. And that has made our environment, our built environment, to be not accessible and not effective to the extent that it should be. So one of the things that I'm learning through this project is the importance of disability consultancy, like having consultants really in our projects and talking with them and learning from their expertise has been really eye-opening. I work with technology. We use a lot of technologies, but then these technologies are developed in a way that is sort of not very inclusive. And when you add it to the construction industry, that is very, like, it's not inclusive at all of, diverse bodies and diverse minds, that makes it more challenging to have technologies that are more effective. So we've learned a lot during the discotheque sessions.
And I think that makes a great segue into what I kind of want to move into next. And I want to bring in some of our consultants. So love to hear from Annabelle and Connie about your experience at these consulting sessions. So how did you learn about them? What were these sessions like? What was your experience like? And what were some of the kind of things that you noticed while you were there?
I'll start. I heard about the consulting sessions through the listserv that Disability Caucus and Alliance had, and it was refreshing for me because it was someone who wanted to know an expertise about something that I'm usually not. No one's actually looking for someone with a disability when they're hiring, but these people really wanted to hear what I had to say and gave me the opportunity to even try technology that I didn't think that I would be able to use because I have a visual disability. And in one of the sessions we had VR goggles, and I was like, I've always been curious to see what it's like to look through a VR goggle when you only have vision in one eye. And so for me, I was like, oh, I can actually do this. It was something I can still do. And then they could see what my perspective was. The people in the room could see this is what it looks like when someone with one eye looks through a VR goggle. And just the experience itself has been rewarding because it was like, okay, I'm a subject matter expert on myself, and someone wants to hear what I have to say about how I've navigated the world with this disability, but they also want to know how can we use this in other areas, in other industries, and to make informed decisions about how we move forward with people with disabilities in the room, not just, okay, sometimes we get a seat at the table, but it's just a seat at the table and we're not allowed to speak about the issue in the room. So this experience has been, oh, I get a seat at the table and I get to talk. So.
I'm so happy that you felt like your voice was being heard. Connie, how was your experience?
So I found out about it primarily through Ashley, working with her in the STS department and being involved with the Disability Alliance and of course the listserv emails. So I found out about it in a few different ways and finally eventually got involved. For me, it was really an interesting and rewarding experience. Being neurodivergent, you get accustomed to being received in a certain way. And it was maybe one of the first places I'd ever been where so many of the things that had always been considered by others, not by me, as perhaps weaknesses or detractions from who I was, whatever way it was perceived by others, it became, not became, because I never really thought these things were that way, but all of a sudden they were my strengths. And those were the things that were appreciated in this environment. And I got to really participate to the fullest of sort of my person and personality in what felt like maybe one of the first opportunities I'd ever really had to do that. And in the course of doing so, I also got to, learn from other people's experiences, all of the ideas and thoughts that I had. Really, it was really fascinating to hear from others what their experiences were and how maybe my ideas or my needs would intersect with theirs or maybe conflict with theirs. It was a very eye-opening and world building experience. And I felt not only more comfortable in my own world for those times, I also felt invited into other people's worlds. And so I think it was just an opportunity in so many ways that I wonder if I'll ever get to have it again. I hope we do. That's the idea.
Well, so I guess so. I'm curious as to what some of the sessions that you have had. So, what are some of the labs or spaces that you all have had the opportunity of consulting with? And I'm curious about how receptive these different groups were, and if you noticed any differences between the groups.
Some of the sessions that we participated in were, we had a building construction session where we got to use robots and just interact with different robots, which, interacting with that as a person with a disability also brought up, like interacting with that as an African American person. So it led to larger conversations about how these robots are currently used in the world, but it was a good experience to be able to, oh, I can use this technology. Some of the other sessions we had our bodies in space, which was really interesting because we were trying to solve the world's problems from a room on campus. Another of the participation sessions. Now, those were the highlight sessions. Now, there was one session where it was mostly online, and I felt like we were invited to the room, but they really didn't want to hear what we had to say. And it was like a technology session, and they gave us, well, we did all this and we did all this. And when we give them feedback, it was like, and we're moving to the next thing because yeah, you're here, but we already did all the work. So it was different with participating with the different researchers. So you got to see, okay, these people really value our opinion. Some people need a little bit more work in valuing our opinion. So there were so many sessions. I mean, I could talk all day, but I want to give Connie a chance to talk about her experience.
I think I found a lot of sort of the same kind of feel that Annabelle is talking about in sort of two of the ones that I'm thinking of. One where we met with more or less the primary researcher who probably had a lot more control over her project, talking about how to do job fairs for people with disabilities. And another, and I almost wonder if this is one of the ones that Annabelle is talking about, which was more technology oriented, where we were being consulted, but at the same time, I think the panel of people that we were consulting with were not quite prepared in some ways for how this was going to go with us. It almost felt like they were expecting a focus group and were a little bit unsure what to do with some of our feedback and how to proceed. And so it was really interesting to see just how different it could be from one project to another, and just how much was probably constrained behind the scenes in the way maybe the one group, which was part of a large corporation, was probably not really at liberty to give too many details about what they were doing in their design, or maybe didn't have the flexibility to adapt and participate to the fullest extent for them. So it was kind of interesting to see the dynamic between the two, but also in a way to appreciate that that's a dynamic that I think just people with disability are so familiar with, not getting to be themselves to the fullest. And so it was kind of interesting to be on the reverse side of that. So yeah, it's just the differences between projects has been really interesting and illuminating, even in the same way that interacting with people with disabilities has been.
I was curious if any of the PIs or graduate assistants have anything else they'd like to add as far as some of the sessions that you've all been involved with, and how receptive some of these folks were when you were meeting with them. Go ahead, Karish.
I'd like to add, I really appreciate Annabelle and Connie's comment, and these were sessions that was really eye-opening for us, and the amount of thing that we learned as researchers was also really amazing. In terms of VR, after that session, we learned like how to actually design VR environments, immersive environments that are more effective, that could give more flexibility to the user in terms of interacting with the environment, not to focus on like one corner of the entire space. This is a 3D space, and I don't know why we never thought about it, that we should kind of like make it more flexible for the user to decide where to put the stuff. We had also another session that we we're using, so we have a system that has a lot of hand gestures. So you can basically control the robot with hand gestures. And in construction, we use a lot of hand gestures because it's a noisy environment. So we say stop or come or no. And then we were having problem really finding those gestures that work for the machine learning kind of based technology, AI technology that we were using for the robot. And one of our consultants mentioned that, why don't you use the sign language, right? And that was an excellent point. Like, why are we trying to make up the signs that like doesn't make sense for other people? It's perfect scenario to use sign language, and that would be easier to use machine learning because there's a lot of studies on that. Another example was with the robot dog, that we had an interaction that our consultants had with the robot dog. One thing that was brought up, they asked, can this dog sniff? And I was like, actually, no. Like, dogs are really good in sniffing, but our robot dog cannot even sniff. So right after that, we added sensing technologies that it's not sniffing, but it's actually sniffing, like sensors for air quality monitoring. And we had another session based on that to kind of go over how the air quality monitoring on top of a robot can help with anything in like experience in the built environment. So it was really helpful for us as researchers to learn how our products, how our research could be more effective.
No, and I mean, so Karish's research has been really fun because it's thinking about things at construction sites. So why do you need hand gestures? Like there are loud noises at construction sites. Like this is really useful. But what gestures to use was like one of the questions that she was asking about. And I think about the robot dog conversation we had was so interesting. So many people wanted to talk about mental health and the robot dogs. No, Karish isn't using the robot dogs for mental health or for police like wellness checks or anything like that. But the whole conversation that spun out with the group of people that we had, and I couldn't have predicted this, was about like the way they sound. Like maybe it doesn't matter on a construction site how this, robot dog sounds because you can't hear it anyway. But if this is something that is coming to like check on someone to see if they're okay and they're having a mental health crisis, that's actually quite bad. So to think about some of the other applications, the conversations we've had was really wonderful. Lyndon, there's a question in the chat, but I want to give Vanus and Oliver a chance if they would like to follow up on this question.
I feel like so much good stuff has already been said, but I'll give Vanus a chance to jump in because I did answer a question before.
I don't know if I can add anything or a specific question in the chat. I can see that question, but I want to talk about our sessions and this lived experience of disability expertise that we use. It's very interesting and my expertise is mostly related to the built environment. So during these discussions with disabled people, the thing which was very interesting for me is that most of the time we design by ADA regulations. They are minimum, as Karish said, they are not written by disabled people. So it's interesting to know their views and their perspectives based on lived experience, which is valuable. And there are some challenges here that I think we will talk about it later. But based on different requirements of different groups of disabled people, there are also some conflicts, but conflicts between their requirements. But this is not where we want to stop the research. This is where we want to find solutions, and we want to stay with the problem, even if it's complicated. But please let me know if I have to answer another question in the chat, because there are many questions that I don't know which one we want to answer. Thank you.
No, that's great, Vanu. So we actually have Miriam who's interested in voicing her question. We're happy to hear your question.
Hi, thank you so much, first of all, for letting me speak out loud. I did want to say real quick, first, Miss Ashley Shew, or Dr. Ashley Shew, I'm not sure, but I actually read one of your works for my disability justice class where I first got exposed to this now, so that was cool. So I guess my question slash comment, I'm not sure to what extent this symposium really has like global voices represented. But something that like I'm personally very interested in researching at the intersection of disability justice and global health is I I think a lot about the impact of technology upon the rest of the world, particularly the global south. Um, and there's this weird sort of dissonance where or a tension where like I so I don't have a physical disability, so I know like this technology helps a lot of people with certain disabilities, not just physical, but sensory and etc. But then I also think about like a lot of times how the tech is used for like luxury, and then like who is paying the cost? So like whose labor and whose resources are being essentially exploited to give us these opportunities. So I guess I'm wondering if anybody has like engaged with like people like or disability justice on a global scale, given that majority of people with disabilities live in the global south. I'm curious if anybody has like any thoughts or has dug deeper into this, or if they might know of a resource or a person to contact. I would really appreciate it because I'm so sorry. Yeah.
That's a great question, Miriam. Does anybody have kind of insight into this particular question?
I can add something related to construction, but about specifically about technology, I don't know. But based on my literature review related to construction and architecture design, when we are talking about ADA regulations, they are for United States. There are some places in the world that they just used the exact same thing, but it's not appropriate for the needs of that specific society or culture. So there are some researchers in those communities, in those countries, that are trying to say that we need different things. For example, there is a specific research about India and Indian culture and why ADA is not appropriate. I mean, that ADA, which is for the US, is not appropriate exactly for India. And this is this is the thing that I can't tell you, but if you want those articles, let me know and I can send you.
No, I mean, so our Andrew Mellon, W. Mellon grant is actually like specifically like regional in some ways. So there's a way in which your question, like we're not even just like US based, we're trying to draw from the Appalachian community that we live in. The project is with Virginia Tech and UNC Charlotte and sort of thinking between those two locations. So for a couple of our runs, we've had teams linked with us through Charlotte, where there's people in several locations to offer feedback. Some of our in-person stuff hasn't been possible to put in both locations or to move, but we've had a couple different runs that have that flexibility. So yeah, so there's a limit to what we can do internationally because of how we're funded and the promise that we're trying to keep our consultants in the region and draw from what is a, economically depressed area of the United States and underserved in many ways. Yeah.
If I may just clarify like my question, my question has a little more to do, and this is more of like a broad question, so I know like people probably don't have answers to this, but I guess I'm curious about like what goes into providing these technologies. So like where do the materials come from? Where do the resources come from? Um, like I guess thinking on that scale of like not necessarily granting like tech access to other people, but more thinking about like how our tech access is connected to other people who don't have that access, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the scope of this project really doesn't let us have that sort of discussion in a richer way, but I appreciate the question. I can see future directions for research. I mean, we have to, we're lucky to get researchers that would like us to come and give consulting sessions. We're at the level, it's not like everyone's signing up for this, right? We're very lucky to have Karish, so it looks like there's like an engineer on our team, and there is. But also gives us a lot of credibility. Thank you, Karish. But also like we've had, we would like to do more of these sessions, like a lot more. And sometimes it is hard to convince researchers that they should let a group of disabled people critique what they're working on. It's not an easy sell from that direction. So yeah.
Yeah, I want to thank Miriam for the question. I see another question in the chat. I wanted to ask one more kind of or another question for our panelists, referring more to our consultant sessions specifically. But I want to get to those other questions here at the end if we have some more time. So kind of a question that I was interested in hearing back from you all. We've been talking a lot about cross-disability conversation, and I just want to hear from y'all about kind of what those cross-disability conversations look like, and how that kind of generated creative conversations during these sessions, and what does that kind of add? What does that add as far as building community and connection with different disabled folks?
I guess I can take a stab at it as someone who's also like multiply disabled, but in ways that are not always visible. The conversation always sort of is enlightening about the kind of things that people experience that are completely invisible to us, or to people who like can't see other or like can't see the disabilities. So like especially people who are neurodivergent, but might also have a physical or sensory disability or mobility might use a mobility device or something like that. Like there's sort of this kind of expected friction that these people encounter, but there's always like more dimensions that um, to their experience than we can even understand. And when looking in these conversations, it's very clear that when one consultant brings up their kind of very niche experience, that then lets other consultants know that, hey, I can also share this really niche experience that I have that is never really asked about or considered. And so it's really unlocked these like kind of, I would say, intimate conversations about like the experiences that these people are sharing just among themselves and about how they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know other people also experienced this thing because it's just never talked about. So I think it's been a great experience for us just to see how deep like the friction does go when we encounter the built environment, but also just that so many of these things just aren't even seen or heard or just even considered worthy to be made visible. And that's, I think, really been eye-opening for me. And it's always fun to see consultants like get excited about things and get excited about sharing and realizing that other people are having similar experiences.
Well, and similar experiences with having very different disabilities sometimes too. That's the really interesting part. We have an intake forum where we have an open box where people are welcome to name their disability or disabilities. And that deserves like a whole paper, a whole book about like when you ask a group of disabled people to each like fill in a box about their disability, no one has ever replied the same thing. So we'll have people with like visual disability. We'll have someone we have one person who writes amputee. He's a double amputee with above knee and below knee and uses a wheelchair and like amputee, like, yes, that's true. But it's a lot more that I think might be relevant to his experiences, but this is what he's disclosing on the form. And then we have one person who had written like about their spinal cord injury and like told me like the level the vertebrae level, and that it was complete and not partial. And it was like a huge, like a long medical description of a diagnosis, which is, I don't know what I'm going to do with that. But I also like just the variety is kind of really delightful in community when you just ask, what's your disability? And people fill in either really long answers or very short answers that don't tell you much. We were in the middle of, maybe it was one of our last sessions, and it came to light. One person had mentioned that they were like partially blind, and it turned out half the room had vision disabilities. Half the room was legally blind. That wasn't, no one listed that on any of their intake forms. So I think it also points to like, and it wasn't like they were all like legally blind for the same reason, very different disabilities, but it was just like, this was our disability in outer space session. And it was just like, to me, it was like delightful just to stumble upon this in a way that, that's really fun community wise. Yeah. And other like Oliver and Lyndon see the intake forms too. So maybe they've noticed this pattern, but our consultants wouldn't know that. But it is one of the best parts about prepping for a session.
That the space one, it was like almost we planned it. It was so uncanny. But I was just curious from Annabelle and Connie, if you could speak to how these consulting sessions, like how did you feel like a sense of community to coming to these sessions?
I definitely did. And even in the one session where, it was a little bit more constrained in corporate, the participants, we all had so many ideas and we came together regardless of what the reception of our ideas was. We just charged ahead. We forged what we were going to say and we were who we were going to be. And even in that slightly more awkward circumstance, it was still a very comfortable environment. And I obviously can't speak for everyone, but for me to feel like I could be who I was, make all the suggestions that I was making. And then of course there were other sessions. We've done work with a group that was doing tabletop gaming, ways of making tabletop gaming more accessible to people with disabilities. And that was maybe one of the most fun opportunities of just sort of anything that I could do. I had a blast the entire time and I felt very comfortable, even in my expressions of disability that would normally make me very socially awkward. It was just a very comfortable space. The things that would maybe sometimes derail my experiences were just accepted, and it was just another thing. Everybody has their thing, and I think there is a flexibility and adaptability to all of the people in those groups, no matter what the group composition was. It was different every time, but it always felt cohesive, and it always felt friendly. And that's not something that I feel I get to experience very much.
My experience is the same. I mean, I think for me, it was comforting to be in a room where people could understand where I was coming from, because we don't have the same disabilities, but we all had a disability. And it was nice to be able to say, to be in a room where we could identify with each other on the same level. But the best part, and I'm going to keep saying this, is just that we were the experts in the room, and that's often not a seat that we have at the table. So, and I think it encouraged all of us to look for other opportunities to be the expert in the room, or to even have difficult conversations with people who don't think about the technologies that we have to use for our jobs. And then it makes you bolder to say, you know what, you can design this better, because I've been using this for 15 years and it's been a struggle. But if you listen to some of the thoughts that I have, maybe we can make some of the software that I use to do my job better.
Oh, well, it's excellent. So I'm curious about some of the barriers or challenges you see to adopting or more people to maybe have consultants come and give feedback? What are some of the challenges of maybe putting this perspective in other people, maybe people, other researchers? I guess another way of asking this question is how might uh, we encourage other researchers or designers to start working with disabled people to um, have them as consultants?
I mean, we've encountered a lot of access barriers in this work. You and I are writing a paper about it, Lyndon, that we were supposed to finish last summer. Hey, that's my fault. Some of the spaces we go into are really inaccessible. We've also like sent graduate students out to check the route from parking. Parking's a huge issue at Virginia Tech, but to make sure people could get from parking to the building we're going to. And we've had like elevator outages, rerouting people. One of the labs that invited us in, everything was built up on a 4 or 5 inch platform. And I called the university ADA office and I was like, hey, we're going to have wheelchair users as part of a funded research study. That's why I put it. Do you think you could put in, a small ramp for the weekend? And they gave me a list of places I could rent ramps from 45 minutes away at our nearest large city, and wished me luck. Luckily, I own my own ramp. What a delight. And we brought that and installed it on that day. It wasn't the best. And we had, was it 4 or 5 wheelchair users on this run, which is more than our usual percentage of, like the most wheelchair users showed up for the run that was the least accessible to wheelchair users. But it's a disability community, so we make it work. And of course, one of the wheelchair users was, I have an extra ramp too. Next time, call me and we'll both bring our ramps, because we had to move the ramp at one point. So getting everyone up and down the ramp and then moving it to a different part of the lab and then having everyone going up and down the ramp, it was it was bad, but in a way that was really good for researchers to see, because when we talk about recruitment into science, the STEM professions, do you want disabled people to be able to be in your lab? That pertains to disability research. This lab was doing work pertaining to disability research, and you couldn't get a group of disabled people in the lab. And it's 4 inches. It's not even the longest ramp you can imagine. It was very doable. But also it's just like a ridiculous barrier to have set up, and that the university, office that's supposed to handle these things that sets up a million ramps around graduation was like, good luck to you, was really disappointing on how these things get handled. Yeah. So that's one access issue we regularly have to think about and run into, and I'm always sending Oliver down to look at where we're going, and then Oliver will send me these pictures and point out any problems that he thinks we're going to have, and I really do appreciate that, because as an amputee I can't I'm just gonna run over and check things as easily as two-leggers like Oliver can.
I'm just curious if other people have thoughts about barriers before I move on to the next question. So kind of the last question before I want to try to maybe let one question from the audience potentially. I don't know if I have time. I'm sorry about that. But where do you see this research going? Sure.
I mean, we're a research team too, so probably publications where we hope to convince our colleagues of things. I mean, I would also love to set a model for how disabled people could be included in research more quickly. Like people talk about, oh, we just need more disabled researchers. Let's rub more disabled people on that problem. But there are huge pipeline issues. Like that doesn't immediately fix the problems that we have. Not that this is an immediate fix, but it's something people could start doing very easily. And in the scheme of things, $100 an hour for a really comprehensive consulting session is actually cheaper than your one paid consultant a lot of times. And the conversations we have are so fantastic. And I think it's easily replicable. Um, yeah, we're going to be writing in the future, sort of in the bioethics literature about how to think about some of these things because it's a systemic problem with the way disabled people have been and have to be regarded in the scheme of a lot of research.
I also I'm currently writing a paper about for an engineering conference specifically about like technology and society and social justice issues. And so I am a former engineer. I study engineers. So my hope is that this can serve as an example of one way of achieving epistemic justice for marginalized communities. Obviously, we're focused on disabled people. They're not the only kind of communities that are marginalized through science and technology. So I'm really hoping that one, we could do something like this again. We can, if we want to think differently about it, I think that would be cool too. But also, like Ashley said, presenting this model that like it is possible to do this now. Um, and it's not, I mean, it takes money, it takes time, but I mean, there's disabled people everywhere. So there's really, yeah, so I really hope that we can serve as an example.
Well, we're just about at time. I do apologize that we didn't leave more time for questions from the audience. But I'm sure anybody on this panel would be happy to speak with you further, and we can share contact information with you, keep the conversation going. Want to thank everybody again for coming to our panel today, and taking the time to listen to us and hear about some of the work that we've been working. I'd like to give a blend.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much, Lyndon. It was a great panel and great moderation. Appreciate the rest of the team as well.